Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th Canto, Chapter 1, The Life of Ajamil. And we are in the middle of the conversation between the Yamadutas and the Vishnudutas, where they are discussing what the highest principle is. And this is translation by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And the Yamadutas, the highest principle that they're aware of, is the punishment for sinful activities, that are prescribed in the Vedas. The Vedas being the coming directly from the Supreme Lord, Lord Vishnu. And they have been instructed like that. The Yamadutas are the agents of Yamaraj, and he is the demigod in charge of punishing those that transgress the laws of the material energy, the laws of the Supreme Lord. And so they've heard from Yamaraj, who's also a great devotee of the Lord, that these rules have come directly from the personality of Godhead himself, and that's the authority. That's where Yamaraj gets his authority, is from the Supreme Lord, and that these rules need to be obeyed for the smooth running of society and the maintaining of the whole material creation. And those that transgress and go against the natural order of things as it's been set up by the Creator and Maintainer, Lord Vishnu, then they get some reaction. And they have to get something called punishment in Naraka, which is the hellish planets. They're below the three worlds. They're not part of the planetary systems. They're below. There's a space between the causal ocean and where the three planetary systems begin. And in that space, this is where the Naraka is located, the different hellish planets for punishment. So that's the highest principle that they know. They don't know any higher authority or any higher principle. It's coming directly from the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the Vedas, and they're acting on the direction of their master, who is an authorized representative of the Lord. And so they're very, very surprised that these great transcendental personalities directly from Vaikuntha come there on the scene, the Vishnudutas, and stop them from performing their duty. So they want to know, on what higher principle are you here? We're acting on the highest principle we know. So this is the conversation that's going on, and this is text 43. The candidates for punishment are those who are confined by many witnesses to have deviated from their prescribed regulative duties. Everyone engaged in fruitive activities is suitable to be subjected to punishment according to his sinful acts. There's no purport there, so we'll go on. Text 44. O inhabitants of Vaikuntha, you are sinless, but those within this material world are all karmis, whether acting piously or impiously. Both kinds of action are possible for them because they're contaminated by the three modes of nature and must act accordingly. One who has accepted a material body cannot be inactive, and sinful action is inevitable for one acting under the modes of material nature. Therefore, all the living entities within this material world are punishable. So, no one can remain inactive even for a moment. And without engaging on the platform of devotional service, then their activities are either pious or impious. Their activities are going to be fruitive. And there's two types of fruitive activities. One is pious fruitive activities, where one gets a good reaction, good result in terms of material benefits. And there's impious fruitive activity, and one gets a bad result or punishment and undesirable reactions, not very pleasurable, distressful. So, therefore, and they say here that one who has accepted a material body cannot be inactive, and sinful action is inevitable for one acting under the modes of material nature. Therefore, all living entities within this material world are punishable. It's inevitable that someone will commit sinful activity. Just being in the material world is sinful. Well, every time you take a step, you're stepping on somebody. You may not be able to see them, but there's living entities there. You're drinking water, you're breathing. Just having a material body is sinful. When it is engaged in material activities with the aim of sense gratification. There's some sinful reaction coming for everyone. But by engaging in devotional service to Krishna, under the direction of his bona fide representatives, then the reactions for the activities, there's no reaction. That's how powerful devotional service is. The body actually becomes spiritualized. The example that's often given is, there's an iron rod. It's iron, there's no doubt about that. But if it's placed in fire, it becomes fire-like. It takes on all the qualities of fire. Red hot, giving off heat and light. It takes on all the qualities of fire. So the material body also, material mind and body engaged in devotional service to the Lord, becomes spiritualized, and there's no reactions. So the Yamadutas are well aware of the precarious position of the living entity not engaged in devotional service, simply engaged in fruitive activities. Prabhupada's commentary: the difference between human beings and non-human beings is a human being is supposed to act according to the direction of the Vedas. Unfortunately, men manufacture their own ways of acting without reference to the Vedas. Therefore, all of them commit sinful actions and are punishable. By acting in accordance with the Vedas, then that's why the Vedas are there. That's why Krishna speaks the Vedic knowledge, is so that human beings can act responsibly and begin to extricate themselves from the modes of material nature and prepare to return home, be reinstated in their spiritual activities, in their spiritual life, free from birth, death, old age, and disease, and the three modes of material nature. It says, unfortunately, men manufacture their own ways of acting without reference to the Vedas. And so they commit sinful actions and are punishable. So hearing from the Vedas and acting according to the Vedas means surrendering to Krishna, because that's why he spoke the Vedas, was so that people could take shelter there in him through the Vedic. So of all the Veda, of all I am to be known. He's the knower of the Vedas. He's what is to be known by the Vedas. Vedas are ultimately meant to bring one back to him. So, text 45. In proportion to the extent of one's religious or irreligious actions in this life, one must enjoy or suffer the corresponding reactions of his karma in the next. So these Yamadutas are the ones that's what they deal it out, they dish it out. This is what you earned now, this is what you get. They see to it that the karma is fulfilled. Prabhupada's commentary is stated in Bhagavad Gita, Urdvam gachanti sattvasta madhye tishtanti rajasa jaganya gunavritista ado gachanti tamasa. Those who act in the mode of goodness are promoted to higher planetary systems to become demigods. Those who act in an ordinary way, do not commit excessively sinful acts, remain within the middle planetary system. And those who perform abominable sinful actions go down to hellish life. So there it is. That's the plan for the material creation. Upper, middle, and lower planetary systems. And the living entities bounce around in there for what seems to be eternity. Going up to the heavenly planets, coming down to the middle planets, getting involved in sinful activity, going down to the hellish planets, serving their time down there in pain and suffering, cycle of samsara, reaching the human form again, having opportunity and perform pious activities, back up to the heavenly planets, back down. Oh my goodness. The soul can stay trapped in there eternally. It's a loop. And the mercy of the Lord through his representatives and his pure devotees, and he himself coming from time to time to break that loop. And this appearance of Lord Chaitanya has come to take everyone out of the loop. Everyone, all right, it's enough already, come on, let's go. And in the middle of Kali Yuga, where the most sinful, abominable activities are being performed, practically no restrictions. And this is only the beginning of this age of degradation in Kali Yuga. Everyone wasting their human form of life, all's gliding down to the hellish planets. Everyone. But for the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Simply pious activities will not stop this cycle of repeated birth and death. Text 46. O best of the demigods, we can see 3 different varieties of life, which are due to the contamination of the 3 modes of nature. Living entities are thus known as peaceful, restless, and foolish. Happy, unhappy, or in between. Religious, irreligious, or semi-religious. We can deduce that in the next life these 3 kinds of material nature will similarly act. That's interesting. Heat and cold, too hot, too cold, but in the middle, moderate. Winning huge fortunes, losing vast fortunes, having more or less just what you need to live. Famous for doing wonderful things, infamous for doing horrible things and relatively unknown. So there's this three modes of material nature, which, if we look at the superintendents of the modes of material nature, we have Lord Brahma in charge of creation, very passionate, restless, creating. And we have mode of ignorance, Lord Shiva, and he is in charge of destruction, the most foolish, and ghosts, hobgoblins, demons, they're all hanging out in that mode of ignorance, which is foolish. And then the peaceful mode, which is overseen by Lord Vishnu himself, the mode of goodness. So we see those three modes reflected in all activities. See, the three modes of material nature are conducting the activities of the living entities. No one can remain inactive even for a moment, so what kind of activities do they have? Well, according to the three modes of material nature, they have either peaceful activities, restless activities, or extremely foolish activities. And that's conducted, our activities are conducted by the modes of material nature. But activities in devotional service are transcendental to the three modes, because they're in connection with the superior energy of the Lord, the devotional energy of the Lord, the spiritual energy is not subjected to these three modes, peaceful, restless, or foolish. Devotional energy is not subject to the three modes of material nature. So these Yamadutas, they have very good understanding. They have been instructed very nicely by Yamaraj on how things are working and what their role and what their part is in what their service is here. They understand how the three modes of material nature are working. I find it interesting that they were very ugly. The Yamadutas are described as hideous. So devotees, they're not hideous, they're very beautiful. So although they have all this knowledge and they're being engaged by a great devotee, somehow they're still ugly. Interesting. It'd be nice to get some insight on why that is. Prabhupada's commentary. The actions and reactions of the three modes of material nature, although it might say, well, Kamsa also, he understood about reincarnation and how he wasn't his body and different things. And he was pretty bad person, although he had this knowledge. So still find that interesting that the Yamadutas are ugly and scary. The actions and reactions of the three modes of material nature are visible in this life. Maybe they need that appearance because it's part of their service to scare the sinful living entity. Maybe it's, like to scare them because they look so ugly. It's like they're outfitted like that. Frighten them, put fear in their hearts. I don't know. We'll see. The actions and reactions of the three modes of material nature are visible in this life. For example, some people are very happy, some are very distressed, and some are mixed happy and mixed distress. This is the result of past association with the modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. Since these varieties are visible in this life, we may assume that the living entities, according to their association with different modes of material nature, will be happy, distressed, or between the two in their next lives also. Therefore, the best policy is to disassociate oneself from the three modes of material nature and be always transcendental to their contamination. This is possible only when one is fully engaged in devotional service of the Lord. As Krishna confirms in Bhagavad Gita, Mam chayo vyavacharina bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down under any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and comes to the spiritual platform. Unless one's fully absorbed in the service of the Lord, one is subject to the contamination of the three modes of material nature and must therefore suffer from distress or mixed happiness and distress. So, we have to be fully absorbed in the service of the Lord. Fully engaged in devotional service of the Lord. This comes by serving the pure devotees. We can't invent our own method of serving God. It doesn't work like that. We have to be fully engaged in serving the representative of the Lord, the pure devotees. I mentioned something here about the contaminations of the material modes of nature because of associating with the modes. So if we associate with people who are under the modes, then we are associating also. We become infected by the modes of material nature by associating with persons who are subjected to the modes of material nature. So if we associate with devotees who are engaged in devotional service, then we also have that benefit of, instead of associating with the modes of material nature, now we're associating in devotional service. So association of devotees is the most valuable thing, because we have to associate. If we don't associate with devotees, then we're going to associate with non-devotees, or those who are subjected to material modes of nature, who are motivated by fruitive activity. So unless one is fully absorbed in the service of the Lord, subject to contamination, and subject to suffer from the distress that comes from associating with material nature. Text 47. Just as springtime in the present indicates the nature of springtimes in the past and future, so this life of happiness and distress, or a mixture of both, gives evidence concerning the religious and irreligious activities of one's past and future lives. So you can see from this life, we're getting the reactions of past activities in accordance with the modes of material nature. And how we're acting in this life indicates what will happen in future lives. As they say, one thing leads to another. It's all connected. Prabhupada's commentary. Our past and future are not very difficult to understand, for time is under the contamination of the three modes of material nature. That's interesting, because in the spiritual atmosphere, spiritual planets, spiritual realm, there is no time. Because there's no past, present, or future. There's only the eternal present. So time, we can understand, is actually something that is contaminated under the contamination of the modes of material nature. Everything in the material creation is under the jurisdiction of the three modes of material nature. So time is also under the jurisdiction of the three modes of material nature. Prabhupada continues, as soon as spring arrives, the usual exhibition of various types of flowers and fruits automatically becomes manifest, and therefore we may conclude that spring in the past was adorned with similar fruits and flowers, and will be so adorned in the future also. So when it is time for spring, this is what happens. Time. When it's time for winter, then a certain thing happens. When it's time for spring, a certain thing happens. It's all timed. When it's time for death, when it's time for birth, when it's time for old age. Our repetition of birth and death is taking place within time. And according to the influence of the modes of nature, we are receiving various types of bodies and being subjected to various conditions. Okay. Time to take birth, and according to the how you have associated with the material modes, it's time to get this kind of a body now. Time is like that. It's part of the material modes of nature, under the jurisdiction. 48. The omnipotent Yamaraj is as good as Lord Brahma. For while situated in his own abode, or in everyone's heart like the Paramatma, he mentally observes the past activities of a living entity and thus understands how the living entity will act in future lives. The omnipotent Yamaraj is as good as Lord Brahma. For while situated in his own abode, or in everyone's heart like the Paramatma, he mentally observes the past activities of a living entity. Whoa. There's a lot going on. But Yamaraj has this potency. He's empowered like that. Situated in everyone's heart like the Paramatma. So it's not Krishna, Paramatma, directly that's judging the living entities. Paramatma, Krishna's expansion as Paramatma, has another function. But Yamaraj is also situated there, because wherever Krishna appears, his devotees are also there. And Yamaraj is a devotee of the Lord. So if Krishna is within the heart, Paramatma is within the heart, then his devotee is also there. Yamaraj is also there. So there's no hiding, say there's no hiding from Krishna. Well, yeah, because Yamaraj is there, and he's observing the past activities, and thus understands how the living entity will act in future lives. Commentary by Prabhupada. One should not consider Yamaraj an ordinary living being. He's as good as Lord Brahma. he has the complete cooperation of the Supreme Lord, who's situated in everyone's heart, and therefore by the grace of Supersoul, he can see past, present, and future of a living being from within. The word anumimamsate means he can decide in consultation with the Supersoul. Anu means following. The actual decisions concerning the next lives of the living entities are made by the Supersoul and are carried out by Yamaraj. Yamaraj is the servant of the Lord. Wow, that's an amazing description here of how this is working. I mean, not an ordinary living being, empowered by the Lord like that, for that particular service, in consultation with the Lord, within the heart of the living entity. The actual decisions of the next lives are made by the Supersoul. So Yamaraj brings the account before the Lord, this, that, and the other thing. And then the Lord decides. And then Yamaraj carries it out. Now, in approaching Krishna, in pure devotional service, approach Radharani. And approach the spiritual master, and approach Radharani. And she brings it before Krishna. It's always like that. The devotee always brings the account before Krishna, and Krishna makes a decision. The devotees are bringing information to Krishna about the living entities. That's their service to the Lord. They're not ordinary living entities. Decides in consultation with the Supersoul. Like Narada Muni, when Dhruva Maharaj was performing his austerities in the forest, under the direction of Narada, who gave him the mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vyāsadevaya. And he was performing his austerities to please the Lord. He had a material desire, but he was going to the Lord to fulfill his material desire. And Narada was very pleased with Dhruva's taking good instruction from the pure devotee how to approach the Lord, become purified, fix a meditation on the Lord. So Narada Muni went to Vishnu and recommended, brought the Lord's attention to Vishnu and asked that he give him some special mercy, and then Lord Vishnu appeared before Dhruva, gave him darshan. And in that way Dhruva gave up his material desire completely. All he wanted was Krishna after that. He wanted to please Krishna. But Krishna, he gave him the kingdom anyway. That was his material desire. He wanted a kingdom greater than his father's. And he ended up being in the topmost planet in the universe, Dhruva Loka. All the other planets revolve around Dhruva Loka. It's the pole star. And Dhruva resides there until the end of the universe. Or I vaguely remember reading that it doesn't end when the universe ends. It's actually a Vaikuntha. It's a Vaikuntha planet. The Lord is there with Dhruva. But I'd have to reread that to absolutely make sure. But I think that's right. So it's the devotees that are presenting before the Lord on the behalf of the different conditioned different souls. So in the case of a devotee, Radharani presents before Krishna, that Krishna might be pleased with this devotee or that devotee. And in the case of the sinful living entities, Yamaraj presents, oh, he did this, he did that, he's really a mess. What should we do with him? And then Krishna decides. well, he's going to need to experience some really nasty stuff. Try to get him to give up this bad spirit here. He's going to have to experience a reaction. He's still subject to a system of reward and punishment is what's motivating. For a devotee, devotional service is motivating. Pleasure of the Lord is motivating a devotee. For a conditioned soul, system of reward and punishment is motivating the activities. So he did these, made these transgressions. All right, he got punishment. He's going to have to learn another way. You do this, you get punished. It's pretty cut and dry. Material nature is working like that. Text 49. As a sleeping person acts according to the body manifested in his dreams and accepts it to be himself, so one identifies with his present body, which he acquired because of past religious or irreligious actions, he is unable to know his past or future lives. Because the person is identifying with the material body and their spiritual consciousness is asleep, then they don't have access to understanding how they got this present material body. They have no access to that knowledge. They may not even be aware that they had a past life and will have a future life. They're simply stuck in identifying with this temporary, gross and subtle material body as all in all. That's all there is. They really have no idea how it came about, who they are apart from this temporary material manifestation. The verse compares to a sleeping person. He's asleep. He's identifying with the dream. And we see that with these movies and entertainment, plays and movies on the material platform, become completely absorbed in the characters on the stage and experience everything as if it were real. You see people crying, laughing, the different emotions come, and they forget that they're sitting in a movie theater. They actually experience being in the performance as if they were actually there. So dreaming is like that, identifying with the body in the dream. You know, sometimes people wake up in sweating and that they were running from something dangerous. A thief, a robber was after them, or a wild animal or something. They wake up sweating and screaming. It was a nightmare. As if it were. But they were asleep. So they're identifying with that in the mind. So similarly, identifying with the gross material body is like being asleep spiritually, as if this was the actual self. Expanded out onto the gross platform. Being in a movie or in a dream is on the subtle platform. And identifying with this gross manifestation, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, as if it were the self, is being asleep, identifying with the gross manifestation. With someone who's identifying like that, they're caught up in it, and they don't have access to know about past lives or future lives, past bodies, future bodies. It doesn't make any sense because they're caught up in identifying with what is right before them in gross material form. Prabhupada's commentary. A man engaged in sinful activities. He engages in sinful activities because he does not know what he did in his past life to get his present materially conditioned body, which is subjected to the threefold miseries. He has no memory, can't put two and two together. Engages in sinful activities because he doesn't know. The reason he got the situation he's in is because of what he did before. It's ignorance, mode of ignorance. As stated by Rishabhdev in Srimad Bhagavatam A human being who is mad after sense gratification does not hesitate to act sinfully. He performs sinful actions simply for sense gratification. That is not good. Because of such sinful actions, one receives another body in which to suffer as he is suffering in his present body because of his past sinful activities. It's a vicious cycle. No way out of that. Can't put two and two together. Oh, the reason I'm suffering now is because of what I did in the past. And yet continues to do sinful activities now, and that will propel that person into another body, and when they will suffer just like they're suffering now. Have no access to that because of the ignorance. It should be understood that a person who does not have Vedic knowledge always acts in ignorance of what he has done in the past, what he's doing at the present, and how he will suffer in the future. He is completely in darkness. Therefore, the Vedic injunction is tamasi ma, don't remain in darkness. Jyotirgama, try to go to the light. The light or illumination is Vedic knowledge, which one can understand when he's elevated to the mode of goodness, or when he transcends the mode of goodness by engaging in devotional service to the spiritual master and the Supreme Lord. So, it's not available in the mode of ignorance, and it's not available in the mode of passion, but can understand how these things work, the three modes of material nature, when is in the mode of goodness. And then there's transcendental goodness, which is the modes, which is engaging in devotional service. So at least try to elevate to the mode of goodness and begin to understand what happens when we engage in sinful activities, and then be able to resist engaging in sinful activities. Can begin to see, oh, been there, done that, don't have to do that. I know where this leads. If I do this, then that. I don't have to do this. As difficult as it may be to exhibit resistance to the temptation for sinful activities, one can understand that if I do the sinful activity, then this happens. So in the mode of goodness, that kind of knowledge is available. And those in the mode of goodness are experiencing happiness, and they don't want to ruin it, so they can understand from the Vedas how this works. One is situated in the mode of goodness, and one who's engaged in devotional service can also understand. This is the purpose of the Vedas, is to come out of the darkness and go to the light, and ultimately to reach Krishna. Yasya deve parabhaktir yata deve tata guru tasyaite katita yarta prakashante mahatmana. Unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master, all the imports of Vedic knowledge are automatically revealed. Adakshi Krishna namadi nabhavet grayam indriyai sevanmukhe jivado swayamiva sparatyada. No one can understand Krishna as he is by the blunt material senses, but he reveals himself to the devotees, being pleased with them for their transcendental loving service unto him. Bhaktyamam abhijananti yavanyaschasmi tatvataha tatomam tatvato yatva visate tadanantaram. One can understand the Supreme Personality as he is only by devotional service, and when one is in full consciousness of the Supreme Lord, by such devotion he can enter into the kingdom of God. So the translations of those nice verses again. Unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master, all the imports of Vedic knowledge are automatically revealed. No one can understand Krishna as he is by the blunt material senses. But he reveals himself to devotees, being pleased with them for their transcendental loving service unto him. One can understand the Supreme Personality as he is only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of the Supreme Lord by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. These are Vedic instructions, and one must have full faith in the words of the spiritual master and similar faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then the real knowledge of Atma and Paramatma, distinction between matter and spirit, will be automatically revealed. This Atma Tattva, or spiritual knowledge, will be revealed within the core of a devotee's heart because of his having taken shelter of the lotus feet of a Mahajan, such as Prahlad Maharaj. So we're reading these wonderful translations and purports by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who is a pure devotee of the Lord. And so we're taking shelter. We have full faith in the words coming from His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So then realizations come because of that. Faith in the words of the spiritual master and rendering service. Even if the only service a person can do is simply hear and chant, that is devotional service. That is taking shelter, the devotional service of the Lord and the Lord's devotee. So then, if one has that, the real knowledge of Atma and Paramatma and the distinction between matter and spirit will be automatically revealed. So Prabhupada is quoting Prahlad Maharaj. Unto those great souls who have implicit faith, both in the Lord and the spiritual master, all the import of Vedic knowledge are automatically revealed. The Vedas enjoin, Tag Vedanartam Sagurameva Bigachet, Sampani Shrotiam Brahmanishtam. To understand these things properly, one must humbly approach, with firewood in hand, a spiritual master who is learned in the Vedas and firmly devoted to the absolute truth. Yeah, that's Krishna's arrangement. Bhagavad Gita, just try to learn the truth, approach a bona fide spiritual master, inquire from him submissively, and render service to him. So this verse from the Mandaka Upanishad about humbly approaching with firewood in hand. So that firewood is rendering service because to make some nice sacrificial fire for serving Krishna. Yes, firewood in hand. Let's make this fire for the pleasure of Krishna. One must approach a spiritual master who has full knowledge of the Vedas and be faithfully directed by him in order to become a devotee of the Lord. Then the knowledge of the Vedas will be revealed. When the Vedic knowledge is revealed, one need no longer remain in the darkness of material nature. In order to become a devotee of the Lord. So this is the benefit of approaching a bona fide spiritual master, a pure devotee who has full knowledge of the Vedas and who is themselves fully engaged in devotional service to Krishna and taking direction from them. And such a person also becomes a devotee of Krishna, and all the knowledge of the Vedas is revealed to them. because Krishna is the speaker of the Vedas. What is it? All the purposes of the small ponds are served by the large body of water. And a lot of different sections of the Vedas for the gradual development of human society. They're like the small ponds. Like heard it explained, in India they have separate wells and bodies of water for different purposes. One is for bathing, one is for drinking, one is for washing clothes, like this. So if you have a big pond or a big river, a big body of water, it can all be done in the same body of water. It doesn't have to be separated. So Krishna is the big body of water. Everything should be brought to Krishna, because Krishna is what is to be realized by these gradual practices like atonement, sacrifice, meditation, cultivation of knowledge. Krishna is the goal. So when Vedic knowledge is revealed, one no longer remain in the darkness of material nature. Come to the light. According to his association with the material modes of nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, a living entity gets a particular type of body. The example of one who associates with the mode of goodness is a qualified Brahmin. Such a Brahmin knows past, present, and future because he consults Vedic literature and sees through the eyes of Shastra Chakshush. He can understand what his past life was, why he's in the present body, how he can obtain liberation from the clutches of Maya and not accept another material body. This is all possible when one is situated in the mode of goodness. Okay, so that's who's in the mode of goodness, is the Brahmin. And the Brahmin has access to the Vedic literature, and so he has access to this knowledge. So then he also knows how to behave, so he doesn't have to accept another material body. Generally, however, living entities are engrossed in the modes of passion and ignorance. So they don't have access. That was what was meant previously by the verse that they don't have access. That those that are in the mode of goodness and those who are engaged in devotional service don't have to take material body again. Not just mode of goodness, but mode of goodness in studying the Vedas. In any case, one receives an inferior or superior body at the discretion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Paramatma, in consultation with Yamaraj. As stated in the previous verse, Manasaiva Pura Deva Purva Rupam Vipasyati Anumimam Sate Purvam Manasa Bhagavanaja. Everything depends on Bhagavan or Aja, the unborn. Why doesn't one please Bhagavan to receive a better body? The answer is Agyatamasa, because of gross ignorance. One who is in complete darkness cannot know what his past life was or what his next life will be. He's simply interested in his present body. He doesn't even accept that he had a past life or will have a future life, because he's simply interested in the present body. He doesn't even think about past life or future life. Even though he has a human body, a person in the mode of ignorance and interested only in his present body is like an animal. For an animal, being covered by ignorance thinks that the ultimate goal of life and happiness is to eat as much as possible. What is it? Man does not live by bread alone. There is even a book called Bhrigu Samhita, which reveals information about one's past, present, and future lives, according to astrological calculations. Somehow or other, one must be enlightened about his past, present, and future. One who is interested only in his present body, who tries to enjoy his senses to the fullest extent, is understood to be engrossed in the mode of ignorance. His future is very, very dark. Indeed, the future is always dark for one who is grossly covered by ignorance. Especially in this age, human society is covered by the mode of ignorance. Therefore, everyone thinks his present body to be everything without consideration of the past or future. So there's a Bhrigu Samhita, which reveals, according to astrological calculations, the past, the present, and the future. So people, it's actually very popular to try to go to an astrologer what will happen in the future. But this Bhrigu Samhita means future lives, not just, 5 years from now, will I have a lot of money. Says, reveals information about past, present, and future lives, according to astrological calculations. But because of the mode of ignorance, people don't take it that far. And they're simply they're not even interested in the past, in this life. They only want to know what kind of material amenities can I expect in the future. Not even understanding that they are setting themselves up for whatever is coming in the future by what they're doing now. But this is ignorance. Everyone is covered by ignorance and simply identifying with the present body, like Prabhupada says. Like the animals, just how much can I eat? How much can I satisfy my tongue? My other senses, sense organs. How much can I satisfy those? That's all that matters, is what I can experience in this body now. Eat, drink, and be merry. So this is the old hedonism. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we shall die. All there is right now. So this is a very unfortunate situation. No access to the information about how to prepare for the next situation. So this is what's being discussed here by the Yamadutas are fully aware of how this works. Fully aware.